Thank you very much. This is what economists call a natural experiment. A natural experiment is when you have two situations where there's sort of one difference between them, for instance, a difference in a policy setting, and that then allows you, by examining the outcomes, to try to assess the effects of that policy difference. And so the natural experiment is that I think Greg came from Canberra today and I came from New York. So we'll see how quickly I collapse, and that will be a measure of the effect of distance on concentration. In this case, my own. As I say, my flight landed about 10 a.m., so I do apologize for coming straight off the plane as I am, but I think this is a very important and worthwhile event, and I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to be here. So what do I want to do in the fairly limited time available? I want to talk a bit about what I see as some of the major issues that we need to grapple with in tax reform, and then suggest also some directions that we can take in addressing those issues. And in many instances, the directions that I'll point to are very similar to those that Greg has just very comprehensively outlined. So where should we start from in thinking about that? And it seems to me that what we really need to start from is the fact that our current system confronts at least three major issues. The first issue is that though the current revenue base is about adequate, it's very clear that we don't have long-run revenue adequacy in our fiscal system. The Treasury's most recent intergenerational report projects that at the current levels of tax to GDP, or government revenue to GDP, and given current entitlements, we will move essentially into permanent deficit at a Commonwealth level as of 2029. And it then projects ever-rising fiscal deficits from 2029 on. And that's largely a result of the pressures that Greg quite rightly pointed to, associated with population aging and increasing health costs. The Treasury projections are, in my view, very optimistic for two reasons. First, the projections in the most recent intergenerational report are based on very high rates of population growth in the medium term. And if you scale down those rates of population growth back towards the level in the previous intergenerational report, then the fiscal gap emerges 4 to 5 years earlier and becomes more pronounced sooner. And second, because the Treasury's intergenerational report, of course, only covers Commonwealth expenditures and Commonwealth revenues, and hence does not take account of the effects that those same factors have on the long-term fiscal position of the states. So what do we face when you take account of that broader picture? We face a situation where either you have to adjust the entitlements fairly dramatically, or you have to adjust the revenues, or both. Our needs in that respect are perhaps not as dramatic as those in Europe and to some extent in the United States, but nonetheless they're very real, and it would be a serious mistake to be complacent about them. The second feature that we need to take into account in considering tax reform is that our present system, as well as having very real issues of long-run revenue adequacy, is in many respects seriously distorting. It is, in my view, dangerous to assess the impact of our tax system simply by looking at average rates and comparing average rates across countries. And I know that the AFTS, Australia's Future Tax System, the Henry Review, was quite careful to avoid that, and I think quite properly so. Because the distortion associated with a tax system is not merely the result of its average rate, but rather of its structure, and of the extent to which its structure, by altering the marginal returns on the different forms of behavior and the decisions that individuals take, by doing that, the extent to which it distorts those decisions. It's clear that many aspects of our tax system are highly distorting, for instance, in terms of the balance between different types of investment in the economy. It's also clear that our tax system is unduly focused on a single tax base, which is income. And that's a very unstable tax base, and the way we tax it is relatively narrow on top of it all. It's associated with what are effectively, for many people, quite high marginal rates, and those marginal rates are often very distorting of not merely decisions about whether to work or not work, but also about decisions to invest or not invest in human capital, decisions to save or not to save, and so on.